Hello, can you hear me? So I was invited to speak here about my journey, how I became a designer, and how it's been in the industry where you know nothing about. And throughout time, I've been the guy who enjoys the challenge, to jump into unexpected areas and see how can I survive there. So my whole journey basically has been like that. But before I start, I want to ask once again, how many of you are designers here? How many are developers? Scares to be a designer in front of developers. How many product managers? Analysts? No analysts. Okay. One question is that how many of you actually work on the field you didn't learn at university? Okay, quite many. So I'm basically one of them. So my journey started in high school, or gymnasium as we call it here in Europe. I was into music, so I went to film school to learn sound engineering. And since it consumes a lot of time of mine, I had a lot of hobbies back then. So after 1 year, I decided to move on, and I went to learn applied informatics and multimedia in Haapsalu College. And I remember there was one course called graphic design, and I had done something, and I had a friend there who basically did all the posters for the school events, and he was kind of a designer back then. So I went to ask him that, okay, what do you think, and what should I think of next, and so on. And then he told me that, hey, your work is kind of cool, so maybe you should try to learn a lot of Photoshop, do a lot of the tutorials and such. So for whatever reason, I took the advice, and 1.5 years later, the very same friend invited me to Delphi, which was the biggest online media company at the time. There I was working as a graphic designer. I did a lot of flash banners and infographics and something like that. So it was a really nice start. It was a very fast-paced environment. And it was actually my first job, and I hadn't done any designs before that. I was just learning Photoshop and doing tutorials. So that was the first dive into the dark. About half a year or more later, I had an opportunity to move to Finland. So I joined the company called Fingo. Stands for Finnish Quality for some reason. And there I stayed over 6 years. And during that time, we basically, by today's standards, we spent a lot of and wasted a lot of money because we built up the same product about 5 times. And each time we had to do a redo for that platform is that we made a fatal mistake that led us to the conclusion that we had to start all over again. So this experience is very valuable because in startup world today, you have investors who tell you that you have to deliver. And basically, they had an old 90s style platform funding our salaries. So we weren't under the grasp of investors or anything else. So we got to do whatever we wanted to do. Then in 2017, I moved back to Estonia. Tried a corporation life. Probably never gonna go there again. I don't know. I did UI design there and infographics which were interactive. So from there, I went even darker. So Cleveron. By now, of course, everybody in Estonia at least knows what Cleveron is and what Cleveron does. But I came from Finland. And I remember my fiance told me that Cleveron is a company which used to be SmartPost. So I was like, okay. So logistics and robotics. And still, when I went there, I knew nothing about logistics. I knew nothing about robotics. I basically had no idea what Cleveron did, but I still went there. And I remember there was only one UI for the touch screens for the parcel machines, and one back office UI, which was just one table and a one detail view. And after 2 years, when I left Cleveron, we had 2 back offices, one for clients and one for engineers. We had 3 mobile apps, I think, and 2 touchscreen UIs, one for the parcel machine and one for the robot. So then I wanted to move on. I wasn't done, so I moved to Fractory. And I remember when I went to their homepage, I was like, okay, metal industry. How many of you know about metal industry? There was this word called laser cutting, and I was like, okay, this must be something like this, maybe. You know, lasers and cutting through the thick walls. But this is actually what laser cutting looks like. So there are these large sheets of metal, and they're nested on the sheet, and the machine just cuts them out. And then they can be bent and powder coated and everything like that. So the industry goes very deep. So going through these industries, I've learned quite a lot, most probably from the Finnish experience. So I want to share to you today some mindset tips to, like, if you ever want to go there or dive in somewhere you don't feel comfortable at, maybe it will help you to survive it somehow. So how do you survive? So main thing you want to maybe understand is that time is everything. So you have to do basically everything to save time. Because if you go to a very small startup where it is still discovering the area it is in, then you need to save time to have time for such activities, to understand the client, to get too familiar with the industry. So first thing is apply standards. So what I've learned in my journey is that there is no point to invent the wheel. There is no point in the fast-paced environment to just, create the new hamburger menu. It's just no point of it. So use everything available there. Don't be afraid to use UI frameworks like Material Design or Bootstrap or everything else. I think some do today. And use UX standards. So back in the day, in 2011, iPhone came out like 4 years ago, and all this UX stuff was just growing. So there wasn't so many examples to look at. But nowadays, no matter where you go, if you go to the bank pages or other user interfaces, they are pretty much form standards that people can understand and are very easy to use. So don't be afraid to use standards. So next one is make deals. Making deals is important. Making deals can save you a lot of time. I will give you examples soon. The designer and developer war is over, I think, at this point, since the designers probably come from the technical background anyway. And making deals helps you to save valuable time you can always spend on something more important. So the example I wanted to give is that in Finland, I think it was the 5th version, where we included all the developers, product managers, and everybody right in the beginning of the process when we started building it up again. And what we achieved is that I didn't have to design a single mobile view for the online platform, e-store platform CMS. So it's a huge, complex platform. So I did some designs for that, but they were the most complicated UI elements. But mostly I didn't have to do that. And the reason why I didn't have to do that is that alongside with the developers, we created a harmony that developers knew exactly like how the pages collapse and how everything works. So we had these deals, and this helped us to save a lot of time spending on something else. So next one is be sustainable. I'm actually surprised that being sustainable is becoming a trend just now. But I think it's always been a priority, at least for me, since I'm quite lazy professionally. So this helps me to make shortcuts or work in the way that I don't sabotage myself later on, because I hate the thing when I design something or do something that I later have to spend like hours and hours to fix, or like hours and hours to change a minor thing in somewhere. So efficiency is the key. You have to be very, very efficient. And maybe one anti-sustainable story would be that in Finland, we hired one developer who was very confident. We didn't know about development back then too much. And he didn't believe in JavaScript. So now imagine designing online store CMS, huge platform, without using almost any JavaScript. So you can imagine no accordions, no drop-down menus, no nothing. And we actually did that, and that's stupid. Don't do that. So the next thing is maybe my favorite. Make bad decisions. And please do not take it literally. What it means is that make decisions that you are not a fan of, but you have to do in order to serve the customer, to go on with the development, put features out there, especially when you are a small startup still discovering your area, then the only constant is change. So when you're like, well, maybe designers have this problem mostly, the urge to polish their designs too much. So if you spend a lot of time on that, and like in 2 months' time, the product manager comes and tells you that, okay, we're gonna change the course, so everything you did is just down the drain. So I would recommend to play for the end game, and maybe to give an example of so-called bad decisions is that in 2007, Apple introduced their iPhone, claimingly being magical. Do you guys know what the first iPhone actually didn't have that was very common back then and already a standard? So the one thing was that it didn't have a background picture for the apps. The second thing was it didn't even have an app store, even though they marketed it. And maybe the most surprising one is it didn't have a copy-paste feature. And it was an industry standard for like 10 years already. So yeah, that's making bad decisions, and probably not to be afraid of making them. So the last one is probably the one that I see many people lacking. It's always very easy to put your responsibility to others, whether the task wasn't perfectly made, or the design wasn't perfectly made, or the development wasn't perfectly made, or wherever you stand in the product cycle. It is always wise to become a leader, to take initiative, especially when you go to the smaller and unexpected areas. So there is probably everybody is learning. Nobody's perfect. Nobody can give you a perfect input because maybe the CIO of the company is also a product manager, still learning. And maybe he doesn't have time because he has to meet investors and stuff. So taking initiative is maybe one of the most important values that the employee can give the company, because it is your product after all too. And get to the truth is also one thing, what I sometimes do. So whenever somebody comes to you with a request of a feature, sometimes to me it seems like it is just a bandage for the problem. So it doesn't fix the problem. So you sometimes have to dig deep and see where the actual truth lies. So let's go through these once more time. So apply standards. Don't be afraid to use what is out there. Don't try to invent the wheel. Be smart about it. Be sustainable. Don't sabotage yourself. And help yourself to save a lot of time. Make deals with each other. It's maybe the most important thing to remember there is to include everybody in the start of the process. So it is easier, everybody can have a word, everybody can have a say how the product is going to form, make bad decisions, and become a leader. So it's been really fun to go through these industries, and I really enjoy the challenge, and I hope that you enjoy the challenge too if you have a chance to go somewhere like this. I urge you not to be afraid. Probably the larger companies are always the safest way, because there is always somebody to show you the way, to help you. But if you look for something else in your life, dive into darkness, then I think maybe these points help you a lot, and maybe they help with larger companies as well. So I think I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Allan. Do we have any questions from the audience? There's one there.
Maybe a few examples of personal challenges you faced.
Personal challenges?
That's from the top, yeah.
In terms of surviving and thriving.
Can you repeat the question, please? Personal challenges?
Any examples?
Do you have a specific wish, like where, in what field, or overall?
Overall.
Okay. Maybe the hardest part is to, let's say in Fractory example, so they didn't have a designer at all, and maybe it was pretty hard to get the flow going in the start. So there are certain challenges, because everybody, developers and the product cycle is different. like meant to be without designer, and if designer comes in there, it can cause some sort of so-called problems. And it's very important that you stay cold-blooded, because you're gonna have some criticism, because you come in with ideas maybe that people don't like because they're not used to. So maybe that's one example. And the other challenge is maybe the communication between designer and developer, to know when to like push hard and when to like give up. So you need to like find a balance between there. Sometimes it's wise to push, and sometimes it's just go with the MVP and do not worry about make a bad decision. Did that answer your question? Okay.
In my case, picking up on what you just said, one of your bullet points was to make deals. And
Yes.
I'm 100% sure that you have come across the situation where making deals is not always easy. Like, there are people with different ideas, there are people with different projections of what do they want. So how do you resolve these situations when you're stuck because somebody wants something different, or somebody has a different view of yours?
I've actually faced that. Maybe I remember one developer became a team leader, and he was so stressed out, so he started saying no a lot. And saying no a lot is very demotivating. So in that case, if you can't communicate well with the person, then maybe you should look for workarounds. Maybe talk more to the product manager and let somebody else talk to him. So maybe somehow like cut him out of the cycle. Because if you design like from designer standpoint, if you design something, it's very demotivating. Like if you usually have borders like this wide, and the developer starts like cutting them, and you end up with this kind of range of things you can do. So it can be very demotivating. So you quickly need to find a new way or a workaround to surpass this problem. And this is very common.
Okay, thank you.
I think we need to move on now. Thank you, Allan. And let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you.